Okay, my name's Billy. I'm an addict. And Joe, before I get going, thank you. It's always a privilege, obviously, to share and hopefully carry a message of that recovery is possible in Narcotics Anonymous and NA. But this one is a little special to me. First of all, you aged me with the introduction by saying cassettes. You know, don't think I didn't catch that one, but there's some people in this room from the Bay Cities that was here when I got clean. And so it's, that makes it even more special. Hey, Vicky, I'm going to front you off. Great seeing you too, Marie and Carolyn. But at any rate, I got clean in the Bay Area. So that's why this means even more to me. I had texted somebody on the Zoom here before we started. I said, you must be a glutton for punishment, man, to be here to listen to me yet one more time. But I truly appreciate it. So, like I said, my name's Billy. I'm an addict, and there's so much that I can talk about and so much that I can't talk about, meaning, I'd rather listen to you. And but for those of you here, I know there's no newcomers, at least none that raised their hand. But I know that in my recovery, I have felt like a newcomer with 30 years. I've felt like a newcomer with 15 years, and it was just when that stuff happened, when I was there, particularly in the beginning, after I had some time on board, when I would catch some feelings or when life would show up, I felt that I took 3 or 4 steps backwards. And what that was a result of was me doing what I normally do when it came to catching a feeling, and that is I resist it, right? Or I try to sidestep it, or I try to justify or laugh it off or whatever, And so what I thought I'd do is share a little bit about the language that I've learned since coming to Narcotics Anonymous. And a lot of that language is new but old, and I'll share with you what I mean by that. So if you are in this meeting tonight, and I say this at every meeting I share at, and for those of you who haven't, and that is, if you're jammed up, stuck between that rock and a hard place where you're catching feelings and you can't, get away from them, you can't bob and weave. Try to, whatever. And if if you want to use or leave the planet, I'm here to say, welcome home. I'm here to say that this program works. Now, when I shared that when people would share that with me, I so desperately wanted to hear it, but then I also got angry at the person because I wanted to judge them. See, I wanted to, my disease was still alive and well, even though I was in that belly of the beast, man, where I had that gift of desperation going. Right. It's the only thing that caught my attention, man. If it didn't hurt, then, I wasn't going to pay attention to it. Right. And that's why I use drugs. Right. And as you know the story, when drugs stopped working, I thought I was going insane. Right. And they had stopped working for years before I got clean. I share about getting clean and when you're not clean, it's a big deal. But getting clean, staying clean are two different animals, so to speak. And so I want to share a little bit about the language I was mentioning to you. And we come here, broken, obviously. I had those tapes going in my head of that I was sicker than most, that you have not been where I have been, so don't try to help me. I don't deserve a higher power because I thought this was going to be about religion when I first walked through the doors. Vicky was there, Gramercy Avenue on August 10th, 1977, Vicky. And I didn't know what to expect. But so, I want to share. I'm going to take you back. I've been clean, coming up on 44 years. I don't want to give myself a front, but August I'll have 44. But I want to take you back 52 years around that. Okay, you want to go back there real quick? And it'll kind of sum up, my thought process when I got here. And to this day, I still have this thought process. And here it goes. So I'm running the streets, ditching school. I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, sniffing glue, gasoline, all that, just waiting to get in trouble, man, And I was with this kid. And we had nothing to do, man. You're ditching school. So what do? We go back to his mother's apartment, right? Where he was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment. And so we go, it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, man, and we were just waiting to get in trouble, right? And as we go into his house, into his apartment, there's somebody laying on the couch underneath an Afghan, those old knitted Afghans. I remember like it was yesterday. And I looked and I said, hey, man, I said, who's that? I didn't know who it was. And he goes, oh, that's my sister, Cheryl. And Cheryl now, by the way, in the neighborhood was one of the finest looking women around. And she was about 8 years old. She was 18 or 19 and, platinum blonde. This was back in the early 60s, and she was dating one of the toughest dudes in our neighborhood. So we knew not to mess around. Plus it was his sister, right? And so I said, what's going on with her? She doesn't look too good, man. I said, she got the flu or something? He goes, no, man, she's paying her dues. And I said, paying her dues. Now I'm 13 years old. I had no clue what he was talking about. And he goes, man, she's riding that horse. I said, what horse? Even though I was a streetwise kid, I didn't know he was talking about heroin, and he goes, that H. And so the pit of my stomach, when he said that, I looked at her and I looked at him, and in my mind, what I think a normal person would have done is would have said, damn, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Where I went was I said, wow, I really want some of that. I really want it. And I didn't even know what it felt like because I was sniffing glue and taking Red Devils and, and smoking weed and drinking wine, but I knew all the tough folks in the neighborhood was doing that. And I say that because, I didn't know what I was getting into. All I know is that it didn't look good and I wanted it. Isn't that sad? It didn't look good and I wanted it. It looked painful. You see, and it was like, I had that tape going, man, that if it isn't painful, and I still got it today sometimes, if it isn't painful, if it doesn't hurt, then it's not worth it. Well, I've learned that lesson the hard way clean, because guess what? We have a choice today. We have a choice. And I'm not suggesting that, we don't have to go through pain, because we do, but we don't have to suffer, right? We don't have to do the Maricopa and all that. See, but I was that kind of guy that, the more scars, the more tattoos, the more places that I had been, I thought were my badges of honor. So I set out consciously and subconsciously to get those. Not going to go through all the war stories. I want to go to when I first came into my first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, and a lot of you have heard this, and some of you have lived it, and Vicky was there. And so, when I came in, I had shuffled around a VA hospital. I'm a veteran, and I was too afraid to check myself in this time, and because I thought they were going to, put me in the building 210 or 211, which was the nut ward. And so I ended up at a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, as I said, in Gardena, California. And when I walked in, I didn't know what to expect. I think I weighed 150 pounds and I had hepatitis and didn't know it. And I walked in and, my heart sank. You know how the story is, when I walked in, I didn't see, Sigmund Freud or my mother or my father, who left when I was 8 years old. My mother was in institutions most of my life. And so, but I wanted, the Monsignor from my parish to be there. I didn't know what I expected to be there. Guess who was there when I walked in? I'm looking at you. Literally, I'm looking at Vicky. So normally when I share that, because we're addicts. And so, but when I walked in, there was a woman named Judy. that had the commitment, and she was setting the meeting up, and she had the 5 IPs I think we had back then, Vicki. I think it was 5, and then we had the little white book, and my heart sank when I saw her. You know why? Because she wasn't, and I don't want to be a chauvinist. I've been married 40 years to a woman who would not put up with me trying to be a male chauvinist, but my heart sank because it was a woman, right? And not so much because it was a woman. It could have been a guy too, but if he didn't have the same tattoos, or I thought came from my clan, from where I came from, then I judged it. And I figured, well, I don't belong here, right? And guess what? She saved my life, right? They say that, judgment in us trying to, think that we know better, what's better, can really cut ourselves short, because what I've learned is that when I'm patient, usually that happens when I'm hurting, but when I'm patient and I sit and I talk to somebody that I don't understand or relate to, they are the ones that carry the message to me. It's just remarkable how that works, how pain will open that up. So so that was back in the day where, I didn't realize I was going to be that guy at that meeting. And that guy was it was when we did 12-step calls, right? We would lay and wait for a phone call for an addict in a park or in a hotel or somebody. And we would, 4 and 5 of us would jump in a car and we would go and grab this addict and we'd drag him back to a kick pad that we had. And it just so happens there was my first sponsor, Hank M., who's since passed on, had a kick pad down in Hermosa Beach, where there were 11 of us, all at different stages of kicking in that house. And that's where I got it. That's where I got the message. So, some of the lessons that I learned are, and I've shared this, about, it's not the tough things, man, that have really gotten my attention and that have been hard for me to do. The most frightening things for me to do are the things that are real, intimate, love, sharing how I feel. What are my words? How do you feel? You guys heard the story of when my wife, Kathy, said, Billy, I need something from you. And I said, I had 7 years clean. And she said, and I said, what's that, Kath? She goes, I need intimacy from you, Billy. Rock my world. I had no clue what the word meant, right? When I had to make amends to my brother, who I love very much, something as simple as that. It took me it really took me a long time and a lot of torture that I put myself through. I would have rather fought, as I share, physically fought you than to look at another guy or woman, but a guy in particular, and say, hey, what you said to me really hurt my feelings, man. Something as real as that, instead of judging him or not saying anything or getting physically, physical with each other. So, I have, there's so much I want to share with you, but I'm looking at who's here and I'll tell you a little bit. Well, I don't usually share about where I come from as far as a kid growing up. And I've been really, with this pandemic and with the situation I have at home with my wife being ill, it's really interesting in where my thoughts have been going. And it's been kind of regressing back to how I grew up. And I think what's happening is I'm trying to protect myself. I don't want to get all heavy and therapeutic here, man, but I think I'm trying to protect myself. And so these thoughts are coming up. And so, I have to say though, with what I'm saying is that, just because I came from where I came from, obviously this disease doesn't care who or what we are, right? What color our skin is, what we, ate for breakfast, and what we watch in the day room on, on TV. But, I grew up in a large Italian family. My dad was Irish, mother Italian. I'm going to breeze through this really quickly. And she was sick. And all her brothers and sisters, there were 16 of them. And her brothers and sisters, believe it or not, were either professional fighters, boxers, roofers, or longshoremen. And the women were having babies. And so my brother and my sister and myself were split up, and we moved in with individual uncles and aunts, and then we went into righteous foster care. And so I say that because, I had to learn a lot on my own as far as, how to protect myself, what I needed to say when I go to a certain home, and I knew what to expect because we rotated, and I knew what certain people wanted from me, right? And I had to, I had to adjust to it. I had to, roll with it. And thank God that I found drugs, because it really helped save my life. But I want to share this story with you. I think Archer's heard this many, many years ago. I had an affinity towards animals, and nature. And I was sitting on my stoop, so to speak, back east. We grew up in this project building, and across the way, how people hang laundry in different tiers of their apartments. And there was a pigeon. I looked over from where I was at, and there was a pigeon that was stuck upside down, flapping its wings on the clothesline. And I was 10 years old, 11 years old. And I, like a fireman, man, I went into action, man. I ran down 3 stories, ran across the courtyard, ran back up. Everybody knew everybody, knocked on the woman's door. She goes, "What's up?" And I said, "There's a bird stuck on your, I want to save it." She goes, "Well, be careful, And so I went up there, and I'm trying to grab this bird and release it. And all the kids down below are kind of laughing at me, like, "Why would you do that?" Because, they wanted to, not all of them, but, a lot of the tough kids wanted to, didn't understand what I was doing. And I tell you what, I tell you the story because it freed me. When I freed this pigeon, the feeling I got was just, I can't explain how beautiful I felt about that, And so I really went into myself, and tried to nurture myself, and of course, growing up in those situations, peer pressure, it's why I started sniffing glue and gas, and the rest is history, But it was something that I hung on to, and it came back to visit me later on. So I want to share with you that one of the other toughest things that I had to do was, my father left when I was, as I said, when I was 7 or 8 years old, and he was my knight in shining armor, man. He was he was a half a gangster. He was a bartender. He was a boxer, and I knew he was out there in the world somewhere, And but I also had some resentment for him leaving us. Right? I didn't understand why, and so years later, he was a decorated World War II veteran, and in Korea. And so I went into the military. And so I found him through the Bartenders Union. And so we got a relationship together. Right. So about just before he was about to pass away, my sponsor says to me, he goes, "Billy, are you good with your dad?" And I says, "Yeah, man, you know what? I've done a lot of therapy and stuff around him. I don't hold a lot of resentments." And he goes, "You willing to write him a letter?" And I said, "Why? Why do I have to write him a letter?" And he goes, "You've been talking a lot about him. And have you told him how you feel?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He goes, "Why don't you put it in a letter?" And so I did. And so I go to his house. He was living out in an area that was kind of secluded. And he was living with a woman, and I was walking around, and I had this letter in my back pocket, and it was hard. I couldn't do it, man. You know what? I was there all day, and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, kid." He never really called me son or anything. He always called me kid, And he says, "Hey, kid," he goes, "What's going on?" And I says, "What do you mean, Dad?" He goes, "You've been sticking around long. Is there something wrong?" And I said, "No, nothing wrong." I said, "I just, thought I'd hang out." I said, "I'm going to be leaving in a few minutes." I said, "But before I go, and I pulled this letter out. And I said, "But before I go, I have this letter." And he looked at me, and he says, "Oh, is that from my sister?" because I had just went to a funeral in Boston where I grew up. And he says, "Is that from my sister?" And I said, "No, Dad." And as soon as I said no, he goes, "Who's it from?" I said, "It's from me." Boy, I tell you what, man, talk about, it was hard. And he goes, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" And I says, "Well, I want you to see it." He goes, "Okay, I'll take it and I'll read it and I'll talk to you later." And I almost said, "Yeah, Dad, let me off the hook, man. Here's the letter and let me get the hell out of this house," right? And he, as I was handing it to him, he looked at me and he goes, "Kid," he goes, "you need to read that to me, don't you?" And I said, "Dad, yeah, I do. I do need to read that." And so I went into the back room with him, and he took him a lot of courage, man, because he was a guy that was very stoic, and so I almost had to sit on his lap because he's completely deaf now. He was 89 years old and he was hurt in the war. And so I almost had to sit on his lap and read that letter to him. And I did, man. I read it. And so I can tell you that the freedom I got from that, and the moral to that story is that, how much music do you have in your heart right now? What is it that you want to say to somebody? What is it that you don't want to take with you when you leave this planet, or when the person that you want to say it to leaves the planet, right? Now, for me, it might not be for you, but for me, that was hard, man. It took a lot of courage, and I think a lot of you can relate to that. Another lesson I learned was that I was into H&I. You remember Rancho Los Amigos? For those of us from Southern California, Rancho Los Amigos was a hospital, and it was an H&I commitment that I had for years. Kevin's on the phone here, and his sponsor, or is on this meeting, and Kevin's sponsor, Hamilton Moorhead, was very close with me, and me and Ham had that panel for years and years. And I cannot tell you, there's not enough time for me to share everything that I learned there, but I want to share this one incident that happened. So I'm there one day, and you know how it is for those of you who have had H&I commitments, and back in the day, I think we were doing it every week. So it wasn't like once a month, it was every week. And I had to drive out to Norwalk, California, and I was living in Hawthorne, I think at the time. And so I had waited to the last minute to get people to go on this panel with me, and nobody could go. So of course I got to judge them. I got to take your inventory for not going, right? It's like, well, can you give me, at least an hour's notice? Well, there was a reason why I didn't, because I didn't realize why, but there was a lesson that I was going to learn when I went to that meeting. And I went there, and so, I don't know about you, but when I get scared and intimidated, I'll do one of two things. I'll either joke and push you back that way, or I'll get angry and I'll get, kind of like, put those shields up. So here I am, supposed to be carrying a message, and I'm for some reason nervous this night because I was alone and I felt vulnerable or whatever. And it was a co-ed facility where there were men and women that would come to this, and there were a lot of Vietnam veterans there. That it was a hospital not only for drug addiction, but for those of you who know it, it was also a rehabilitation center. People that were hurt in the war or just hurt in general out in the streets, right? And so I was sitting there and setting up the meeting, and as people were walking in, what do you think I was doing? Because I was afraid. I was judging. I was telling them, this person's a punk, or this person hasn't done what I've done, or wait a minute, he's done more than me, or she's going to think I'm weird, or his. And so what I was doing is what I've always done consciously and subconsciously, is that I've separated myself from the human race. I separated you because I judged you and I categorized you. And guess what I was left with was me. And my disease was really happy about that one, boy, you see. And so I was judging everybody until God walked in, right? And God walked in. I still get a little emotional on this one. And God walked in the form of a guy that I would have used with. He had the right tattoos. He had his hair kind of combed the same way, and about my age. But the only difference between him and me and all of us was that he was a frozen addict. Right? He was frozen, meaning that back in Southern California, and I think up and down the coast of California, somebody decided, they did a PBS special on TV about this, that somebody mixed up a bunch of synthetic heroin and put it out on the streets. And as soon as you put it in your arm and fixed it, or snorted, I guess, or whatever, you became instantly, for the rest of your life, irreversibly frozen. And the special was called The Frozen Addict. Well, I didn't realize that's what I was looking at. And so two orderlies brought him in and they sat him down. And I said to myself, Billy, how are you going to judge this guy? What are you going to say about him? I knew right away, but for the grace of God, that could be me, right? And so I got a huge lesson on this one, man. And I shared, right? And as I shared, tears were coming out of his eyes. He couldn't, because he was so frozen, he couldn't make noises. All he could do is just let these tears come. He couldn't wipe his butt. He couldn't call his mother. He couldn't hold his child if he wanted to. And right then I says, you know what, God, you know what, I'm healthy and I'm not going to throw this away, that what we have. So many times that I've taken this for granted, man, taking this thing that we call recovery for granted. And so I learned a big lesson there. I just want to share, and then I want to hear from you guys. I just want to share about, when I first got clean, Hank said to me, he goes, Billy, I want you to write a list of all the things you think you're going to use over. I said, use over. And I said, well, I don't know, my mother dying. And that was about it. I didn't understand. Well, life shows up, right? I've been on the planet for 69 years now, just about. And have had, I've got, over 4 feet, okay, 3.5 feet. I'm half Irish, so I exaggerate a little bit. I get, 3.5 feet of scars on me from stuff that happened when I was out there and in recovery, right? It's funny. I shared this. My wife's a normie, and so so I'm in our office years ago, and I'm in my skivvies. I'm in my boxer shorts, right? And I've got a tape measure, and I'm measuring all my scars. And she walks in, she goes, "What are you doing?" And I was kind of like, she caught me, I don't know. I felt like shame, And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm measuring all my scars." She goes, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because I'm a guy, and so I say that it's funny, but I say it because a lot of those scars happen clean. I've had open heart surgery. I know that there's, I'm looking at a woman here who we're in the Zipper Club together, and I had a stroke when I was on my way working, and they had to crack my chest open. I had a hole in my heart that I had even when I was using. So it's a whole long story, but. I've had, I was diagnosed with cancer right after a year after I had the open heart surgery. I couldn't believe the doctor at the VA hospital called me and said, "Hey man, you need to come in." And I had an advanced case of prostate cancer. And I said, "Well, I can outrun that when I was 50 years old or 52 years old." And he said, "No, when you're that young and you have prostate cancer, it's usually a death sentence, and you have a pretty aggressive form. So we're gonna, we need to do a radical surgery." And so I did that. Now, am I telling you these stories for you to feel sorry for me? No, I'm telling you these stories because life's going to show up. Know that somebody else has gotten through it. And the big deal was about the medication, right? I was afraid that I was going to get hooked, man. And I did what was told me around, what you guys told me. Talk to your sponsor, give the drugs to your sponsor, your wife, read in times of illness. There's so many tools that we have, right? And so I want to share that. So that when I had the open heart surgery, it was an emergency, and I was on my way to Japan. I never I never went to high school, right? And I was in high school for 2 weeks, and I got arrested for selling Sacanol tablets, and I never had to go back to school, man, because nobody had, told me. And the reason I say that is because fast forward, I became the senior vice president of the largest golf resort country club business in the world, right? Senior vice president, and so a guy that that really didn't have any formal education, but it was the 12 steps, and it was working a program and being for real is what, got me through it. And so I say that because I was on my way to Japan for this this deal, and my eyes went crossed. I ended up at UCLA. They gave me open heart surgery, but they had to keep me there for a few days before the surgery because it was a trauma hospital, as you know, and mine was stabilized, but they still needed to open my heart, right? And so I went down after the third day, and I go into the, I had operations before, and this was different. When they do an open heart surgery, the whole chamber is just weird, man. It's really, and I was laying there, and my wife wasn't there because it was an emergency, right? And I was laying there, and I was saying, they say, what went through my mind was this, they say, if you had 5 minutes to live, because I wasn't sure I was going to come out of it. I had a feeling I was, open heart surgery, but you could not wake up, right? And they say, if you had 5 minutes to live, would you have to pick up the phone? And when that was first told me, I said, yeah, I would. And what would you do? Well, I would say, I'm sorry, forgive me. I love you, all those things. And the moral to the story, you know what I'm saying, is that we should be living our life to where that's a short phone call, right? And so the phone, and so I sat there and I said, geez, who do I have to call anybody? And I said, well, sure, I sure do. But at least the call was a little shortened because of the 12 steps and because of me learning around here. And just before I went out, just before they knocked me out, I had a vision. Now, I'm not going to, say it was anything, but, it was like, or I had a thought, and the thought was, I didn't think about my sponsor. I didn't think about my wife. I didn't think about my mother. You know what I thought about that came to me was that pigeon that I saved when I was 10 years old. I swear to God, that pigeon came and comforted me, And so what that says to me is that, whatever we give that we don't realize we're doing comes back to us in the strangest ways. So I just want to end and say that, let the music out, some of you know that my wife is suffering from suffering. She's living with and laughing through end-stage lung cancer. And they gave us, 14 months ago, they gave us 3 months to a year. And so just today, we had the hospice people come in. And, it was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing. And I share that again, not for any, there's a piece in my head that tells me, don't share this because people are going to think you're a punk. Can you believe that? I mean, I still go there. I don't go there a lot, but it's like, really? If you had a child, Billy, if you had a kid, would you tell him not to share with you because you're a punk, because you're hurting? No. So I have to love myself. I have to, put my own seatbelt on and love myself. So I usually end with this, but from the mouths of babes, comes wisdom. And Rachel Elizabeth, age 9, when asked the question from her mother, Rachel Elizabeth, what have you learned so far in life? And she goes, well, what I learned is that if I want something really, really bad, I have to keep my room clean all week. Now, how beautiful is that one, man? It's like, so I keep my room clean by working the steps and doing this stuff. There's 2 things that I'm going to take to the grave with me. There's not much that I know. My God has changed. My higher power has changed many times, right? But what has not changed? 2 things that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous works. And the next one is that love is real. And that it is in love that I trust. In God we trust, in love I trust. So with that, thank you for listening to me. And I look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Billy.
So much.
Thank you,
Hello,
Billy.
Billy.
Mahalo
Thank you,
so
Billy.
much, Billy.
Wow, what a great share. Thank
Love that
you.
message.
Yeah.
Great
So
message.
glad that you got
Wow.
to come here.